Welcome to Manna from Heaven with Sharon Gaines Lee and Kingdom Purpose Television. Today I have Carla, attorney. She don't want me to call her attorney, but I'm going to call her attorney Carla Cruel. And Carla lives in Hawaii now. She did something on Instagram that really caught my attention. So the last minute I asked Carla, could you come on and do a program with me because I thought it was so interesting. So she freely accepted my offer, and I am so excited, and you will be excited too about this, especially Black people. I think so. We're gearing this more to Black people, but white people you can listen into because we love each other. It's not a problem. You can learn
Mhm.
about us from us. And so today's topic is going to be this is one of Carla's. She calls it cruel thoughts. Her last name is Cruel, and she
Yeah.
calls it cruel thoughts. And so every once in a while on Instagram, and then she'll post it on Facebook. She'll put in something that's going through her head, or something she sees, or concept she sees being misused, or thought. Just Carla is just Carla. Carla is Carla. So she'll come in, and I love this. I mean, when she started talking about this particular topic that we're talking about today, I thought it was so appropriate and so necessary for us to hear because we can take away the myth of this. And so I'm going to start with, and I'm calling this topic dispelling the myth that blacks don't support blacks. Dispelling the myth that blacks don't support blacks. And Black people listening, because we need to hear this, because we need to have a different mindset concerning this. And Carla's going to help us, aren't you, Carla?
Of course. Yes.
How are you tonight, Carla?
Pretty good. Pretty
Thank you
good.
for joining me. So we want to start. I just want you to come in. Tell me a little bit what got you started with this topic, Carla, and then I'll ask you some more questions.
Sure. So to be honest, so I create these cruel thought videos all the time. And really it's me thinking about stuff in my head, and it overwhelms me, and it sort of becomes like, fire shut up in my bones, right?
Right, right.
So I and then I'll create a video because it's a way of me getting that release.
Right.
And I'm posing questions usually to get people to think differently. So in particularly, what happened was I watched another friend's video on Instagram, and she posed a question which I thought was a great question, and I commented on the question. And she was just asking about like black folks collaborating with each other.
Was she
And
white who
somebody
asked that? Was it a white girl or a Black girl?
she's black.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And someone commented on there that sort of, I can't remember what her larger question was, but they commented that black people are never going to be able to do anything because they can't work together, right? So that was sort of her comment. And she added some other things, and I responded, we need to be careful when we make these absolutist statements about
Mm-hmm.
things. And I gave her examples of why sort of the why the she was my friend was specifically talking about the Montgomery bus boycotts
Uh-huh. Okay.
and how they were effective, and the power of the black dollar, and the if we boycott it now, it will work, et cetera, et cetera. And so the person was saying, no, people would never do that because black people can't ever just follow through and work on stuff together, et cetera, et cetera. And so I commented, I said, well, here's the problem, is because they've sensationalized the Montgomery bus boycotts, not realizing that it took a really long time for people to actually boycott. Right. I said it was a small group of people that said this was a good idea. It started with a small group, but they were consistent, and they continued to do it over and over again. And over time, they said, well, what is it that we need to give these people so they will stop riding the bus? So they started getting the rides, and white people joined in, and they would say, hey, we're going to pick you up. So there were black people who didn't buy in right away because they said, listen, I got to take care of my family. I
Yeah,
got to
yeah.
survive. I need this money. And so they were still riding the bus. But when the civil rights leaders gave them a mechanism for them to be able to walk, for them to be able to get a ride, right? And then they said, okay, we'll stop doing the buses, right? So what I commented on there is I said, it only takes a few to start it. And then if you stay consistent, others will join. So instead of us looking at the Montgomery bus boycott as, oh, the people got together then, but we won't get together now, is that
Right.
we need leaders to step up to be the small group who can build into the critical mass. That's the
Mhm.
comment I made. And then the person responded back, sounds good, but I said what I said, right? Okay. So when they said that, I started thinking, what is underlying this person's statement? And I was like, it's that belief, that myth that Black people, we are the only race of people that don't ever come together. Every other race does it, but we can't do it. And because people have believed that to be a truth. And so what I was seeing, this is a very long answer to say.
Yeah, but that's okay.
Right. What I realized was usually I hear people say it and I just let them say it. I don't, because I know where it's coming from.
Yeah.
So I would just, I choose my battles, right? My dad taught me you only argue when you're wrong. When you're right, you don't need to argue. Right.
Right.
Just let them be wrong. Right. So I said, you know what? I never thought about the negative of not stopping people from saying, of not addressing it. Letting the myth carry on brings these other things. So that's what motivated me to do the video. Was I said, you know, I know enough facts that I have to challenge this as a myth. Because it is actually causing a harm to us that we won't even try to work together because we believe that we can't work together.
Right.
And that everyone else does it, but we're the lesser group of people and we always do it the worst way.
And what you're saying, Carla, is so, I don't want to, when I say this next statement, I'm not presuming that what you're saying is not spiritual, because it is. It is. I mean, but when I thought about this, I said, wow, if we're the only race, that's a presumption that you know, that the sin consciousness that one can have is only on the Black race, and the Black race, you know, are the only ones. But there's every other race is not. Their sin consciousness is in order except ours. That's a presumption that is wrong. Because when I thought about this, it was like Jesus died on the cross only for Black people,
right?
Or did he die on the cross for everybody, that we could think and we could come together and we could work together? So I think that whole thing is a divide and conquer, don't you think?
Oh, yes, absolutely. It perpetuates. So I think that underlying the maintaining of the infrastructure in the United States of America, to maintain the economic structure of the haves and the have-nots,
right?
For poor to remain poor and the rich to remain rich, and everybody to kind of sit in their proper places. They do it by maintaining a us versus them, right? So as long as, so I tell people this all the time. I believe that Dr. King, they were fine with Dr. King being Dr. King and running around and yelling civil rights until he started mixing with other races and saying, our struggle is your struggle. My white brother who is struggling to feed his family, I read one of his essays. He said, I was sitting in jail and I was talking to my jailer and I asked him what his daily life was like. And he talks about waking up, coming to this job that he can't hate, people yelling and screaming at him, trying to put food on the table for his children, and then waking up and doing this all over again. And Dr. King is asking the jailer, what, you know, in your dream world, what would you want? And why can't you do that? Well, I don't have money, or I don't have a home, or I don't have this, and I don't have. And then Dr. King said, my brother, your struggle is my struggle. Right? What Black people are saying is that we as a race are living the same life that you're living. So when he started dealing with the Quakers and doing all of that, the labor movement, that's when he was assassinated. Fred Hampton, when was he assassinated? When he started to bring the Puerto Rican group, the white Nazis, the Black people, he brought them together, and they were like, nah, he got to go, because us versus them, the whites versus the blacks versus the Asians, the blacks versus the Hispanics, the whites and the Hispanics, right? You know, even recently when I started thinking about how Hispanics are categorized as white first, and then they have to say whether they're Latino or not, right? And I said, so if I'm a dark-skinned Dominican, or if I'm a dark-skinned Puerto Rican, do I have to identify as Black? Right? Do I have to? But the fact that we have been,
Carla, is it on the books like that?
In some cases, yeah. So I've been doing some legal some of the legal work that I've been doing in
Mm-hmm.
related to civil rights
Right.
stuff,
Mm-hmm.
they oftentimes, for example, you say, what person are you looking for? They'll say white, Hispanic, right? They'll say black person, but then
Mm-hmm.
when they'll say white, they'll say black, and then they'll say white Hispanic.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, why are they called white Hispanic? So I started to look at demographics. And if
Mm-hmm.
you notice, when you fill out demographics, it'll say, are you white Latino or are you white, and nothing next to it. And what I started to realize, that this again is still a mechanism of
Mm-hmm.
perpetuating this us versus them, this
Yeah.
better hierarchy around race.
Mm-hmm.
And I I am not like the traditional Black person who cares about issues of equity. Let me
Mm-hmm.
say that. Similar to you, Sharon, I've lived outside of
I
the
was going to
US.
say, no, Carla, you're not.
Right. Right. No, like we've traveled outside of the US. So we know
Mm-hmm.
that when we go outside of the US as Black people,
Mm-hmm.
they'll be like, oh, you're an American. So they start off with American and
Yeah.
then they go to your
Yes.
color. They go
Yes.
to whatever. But
Absolutely.
you're an American, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Africans, you go to different countries in Africa and they be like, you can call yourself Black all you want. You're an American
You're right. That's
who
exactly
happens to
right.
be Black, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I need you to recognize that. But Americans, Black Americans, especially when we haven't traveled out, we
Mm-hmm.
see Black and we just say Black, and we're like universalizing our experiences for everyone
Right.
outside.
That's right. That's right. Mm-hmm.
And we shouldn't do that, because that's not true. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
the reason I bring this up is because this concept of Black being lesser,
Mm-hmm.
and that we universally get it wrong, it breeds a distrust in us
Yeah.
amongst one another, that we
Mm-hmm.
never want to work with each other,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then by not working with each other, we never overturn the infrastructure. We don't
Right.
change anything,
Mm-hmm.
right? Nothing can ever change. So it's a great strategy to divide and conquer,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
To, I care as much about poor white people as I care about poor Black people. I know
Mm-hmm.
people want me to care more about poor Black people,
Mm-hmm.
but I think poverty shouldn't exist,
Mm-hmm. Right. For
especially in
anybody.
America. For
Right.
anyone, no one
Mm-hmm.
should be
That's right.
poor.
Mm-hmm.
No one should be homeless,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But when they talk about homelessness, they'll talk about homelessness and then they categorize people:
Mm-hmm.
vets, Blacks.
Mm-hmm.
They put us in categories instead of saying, why aren't we taking care of all of those people,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because then the individual person says, well, I want to take care of the person who's like myself,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so then they don't want to fight the infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You
Right.
never
Mm-hmm.
challenge the infrastructure. You just continue to. So anyway, I'm sorry, I'm going on one of
No,
my
no, no.
rants.
That is excellent, Carl. That is good. It ties right in. Go ahead. Finish up. Finish up. Fire.
So my thought process in all of this is that we can do collaborative economics.
Mm-hmm.
I think today an economic boycott would make a difference, right?
Okay. Okay.
I truly believe, if we said to Black folks, just African Americans in the United States of America,
Mm-hmm.
we said, you know what, for one day, I don't want you to spend $1.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go to the store. Don't
All
buy anything.
Americans, not just Black Americans.
No, I'm starting with them. If you just said to ask Black Americans
Okay.
to not spend $1,
Okay.
it would cripple the economy.
Yeah,
However, when you approach another Black person and you say to them, this would be a great idea. Why don't we make, Juneteenth the day that Black people will not spend any money,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
They'll be like, oh, you ain't gonna get no other Black person to do that, because Black people can never come together. That's the first thing out their mouth.
Yes.
They've been programmed
Yes.
to not even attempt it,
Mm-hmm.
because they believe that their brother and sister cannot be trusted.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. And I'm like, but you don't actually need everyone. You need a critical mass of people.
Mm-hmm.
If you ask for everyone, maybe you get 30%, maybe you get 40%. But most Americans don't know that Donald Trump, our president,
Mm-hmm.
he was
Mm-hmm.
elected to office. Do you know what percentage of Americans actually voted for him to become president?
How many, Carla?
It's less than 30%. He was the president of the United States, and it's less than 30%. See, this is the thing. you got to take the US population
Mm-hmm.
and then you shrink it down to who are eligible voters,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
And then, and that was a smaller group of people. So the numbers are kind of around like maybe about 65% of Americans are eligible voters.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. So 35% of Americans weren't even allowed to cast a vote. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
At that
Mm-hmm.
time. So
Right.
now let's say we're at 65.
Mm-hmm.
He did not get the majority of the 65. He won the electoral college.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's
So
another story for another time we'll talk
that
about.
is,
Okay?
but so we're in the 65. Those are eligible voters.
Mm-hmm.
But typically of the 65 eligible voters, only 60% of 65 come. So now you shrunk it down a little bit. So that's what 60% of 65 of the 65% of the whole total population. And then he got 30% of the 60. So that's less than 30% of Americans who even voted for him. And even in that, less than 30% were fans of him. They just didn't want to vote for Hillary. Right. So the news will make you think half of America hates people. Half of American are Trump, but that is not the truth.
Not even now. They're still perpetuating that now.
They are, and it's not the reality. It's a very small percentage, and they ignore all of the independent voters. They ignore all of the people who just don't vote because they no longer believe in the system. All of the people who are unregistered to vote. All of the prison. All the people in prison can't vote. Right. So think about all of these people who did not choose this president, but they will make you think that most Americans. Why? Because it maintains the infrastructure of us versus them. Right. I people have the issues with Donald Trump. I don't even think he's the worst human being or the worst person who's ever been in the White House.
Who do you think is
the worst person to ever be in the White House? This is
not one of my questions, but you brought that up, so I want to know.
I'm sorry. But during our living lifetime, I think it's Dick Cheney. I think Dick Cheney is one of the most evil people who have ever graced the White House.
And why do you say that? Because I still want to know, because you just
because if you start to look, there are a lot of policies that we are suffering the consequence of. Him when he was the vice president, as well as when he was an advisor to George Bush Sr. When he was floating around in those circles, he was doing a lot of backroom deals that created the policies that maintain the infrastructures of poverty and destitution and violence and crime and all of those things. A lot of those come out of policies that Dick Cheney was working on in the background to maintain the money of those who are already rich. So as one specific example, what was explained to me was when he was vice president, he had a meeting of the major corporations like gas, oil, gas.
Like Hal Burton, I remember that from upstate Pennsylvania. He had a lot to do with that.
And he said, hey, what policies do you need to be in place so y'all can drill more oil here in the US? And they said, well, you need to keep the EPA off our back. So they basically rewrote a lot of the laws without most Americans even knowing what they did, that allowed for a lot more pollution to be, so the EPA wouldn't even be able to police certain people because it wasn't wrong anymore, right? So you said, it's funny you say Pennsylvania. So the fracking that happened in Pennsylvania, it got worse and worse and worse. And a lot of those come from policies that Dick Cheney was maneuvering in the background.
Right.
So you got people sick with cancer, diseases, health issues, so that somebody else could be rich.
Right. That is so evil. That is, oh gosh, that's Carla. That's a different topic. But just while I'm right here, one more question. His daughter seems like she's the opposite of him. Do you think?
That's what I've seen, and I pray that that's true, because Dick Cheney was real good at hiding his evil. But maybe his daughter was like, oh, my dad is evil. I got to do something good to balance out his evil.
Right.
Okay, so here, what I said in my Instagram video, and it'll be shorter here because I've said it once, is that this is a myth that every other race of people except for Black people don't work together. And so is it true that African Americans have difficulty coming together and working together? Yes, that is true.
Mhm.
Is it also true that other races of people have
Oh, you
difficulty
said
coming
yes,
together?
that's true. You said that's true.
Yes,
Okay,
it is. There
talk to
is
me.
a difficulty.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a great question. I didn't say that we never do it, but I do think that we don't come together easily.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay. Okay.
and part of that is a lot of historical issues, right? A lot of distrust.
Mm-hmm.
We know from history of civil rights movement that there's often a Judas in the group, right? And somebody who ends up selling out. And because we as a people are hyper aware of that history,
Right.
right? What happened to Malcolm X? What happened to Dr. King? Like we know that there was someone on the inside, Judas and the Black Messiah, Fred Hampton, right? He had a Judas in his group.
Mm-hmm.
So we're so hyper aware of that
Mm-hmm.
that we often won't even collaborate because we want to stick with the ones that we can trust,
Mm-hmm.
because we know we bring somebody outside. And I actually heard someone say this recently. There's always a Black person who will sell out to a white person. They have.
Oh, that's in every race, though.
It is. And that's the thing. That's the key thing. It happens with every racial group. We become convinced that it only happens with us. And that's what I was trying to get at, is
Mm-hmm.
that every group has it. And what I said in the video is a couple of things that become the problem is that the news media does it as well. They overgeneralize, right? So they say, we say Asians, right? But Asian is very broad. Russians are Asians, right?
Mm-hmm.
Korean, Japanese, Chinese, Cambodian, Laotian,
Mm-hmm.
Uzbekistan, right? Sri Lanka, Malaysia, all of those different people. They are not all the same, and they don't all get along.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have friends outside of your own racial group,
Mm-hmm.
right, you get your information either from friends who are in that group, from TV, and thus you end up carrying a lot of stereotypes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you speak things that are untrue. Black people think, you'll hear Black people say Asians stick together, Hispanics stick together, but Black people never stick together. And it's like, all Asians don't stick together, right? Like a Vietnamese who drops in a town that is predominantly Korean, the Koreans are going to be like, "Come on, my Asian brother, I'm going to help you out." Like they don't do that either, right? And the example I gave was of my girlfriend. She lives in California. She's Vietnamese, and she lives in a community that has a lot of Vietnamese people, so much so that now they're like third generation. So
Mm-hmm.
they've actually gotten to the point where there's enough Vietnamese people that the kids don't even speak Vietnamese anymore. They can't communicate with their grandparents.
Wow.
Because they're so Americanized, right?
Mm-hmm.
When other Vietnamese comes to her area, they don't help them out. Like, oh, you my brother. They do. Oh, well, we had to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps.
Mm-hmm.
You do it too, right? You got to struggle too. And so the example I gave is like in Philadelphia is predominantly African American, right?
Mm-hmm.
Philadelphia, Baltimore, Atlanta, Chicago, where you have high populations of African Americans.
Right.
We will see an Asian immigrant come in and start to be taken care of and doing well, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what I was saying is that sometimes that's a product of them being a minority inside of a minority inside of a minority. So when the group starts to get smaller, people are much more likely to support and help you out, right?
Right.
So there's a section in West Philadelphia where there's a number of people from different Northern African countries, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they live near each other and they support each other, and they've actually created some like associations for that, because they're a minority inside of minority inside of a minority. So even though they're from 4 or 5 different countries, they're like, we speak common language. We don't even
so it pushes them together.
It pulls them together, right? That commonality. And the more you have commonality, the more it's easier to have cohesiveness and move forward. But one, we try to universalize that every Black person has the same Black person experience in America. And that's not true. There are some things that we have in common, but we often forget that there were freed Black people in America who never were slaves. So their children were generation after generation. We forget that there were some Black people who were freed, and then began to own slaves, right? That's a mentality. And then there's generation after generation. So people like, I'm Black, so I must be a descendant of slave. And sometimes I want people to do this background because I'm like, it would be real funny if you found out that you Black, but they were slave masters. Right? And you like walking around, I'm just
from the Madengo tribe.
Right. And so my point is that we need to have more nuanced conversations, right? When I was in high school, I learned about the Trail of Tears, and we read some, my teacher had us reading some Native American journals from the time of the Trail of Tears. And one of the things I learned, and I didn't know, is that one of the reasons, there were many reasons why the old English attacked Native Americans, right? They wanted their land, et cetera, et cetera. But in the slave states, Native Americans were stealing us and marrying us to free us from being slaves. So they were helping to free slaves because once you were in the Native tribe, you were of a different nation. So they couldn't force them back to be slaves. So one of the ways they were helping out, and Andrew Jackson was like, I'm sick of these Native Americans, right? Kill them, get rid of them, because we need our slave population to make money, right? And we need Black people to be here for a reason, right? So all of these years we've been bogged down with these lies, right? We even like, despite the support that Native Americans had for us during a period of time, right? We hear stories about their struggle today, and it's like, but we still haven't got our reparations. And I was like, listen, we're all struggling, right? We don't have to. Sorry. So I think that some of us
Now that's good. Don't be sorry. This is good.
Yeah, some people still, they talk about white supremacy, about being anti, but as Shakespeare says, methinks thou doth protest too much, right? I feel like when I hear people, Black people, white people, Asian people, blah, blah, who blame white supremacy on everything, right? Not saying it's not there,
right?
Please don't say it. But when that's the main, Scripture says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, right?
Yeah.
If you are talking about white supremacy all the time, white supremacy, white supremacy, white supremacy, I start to think in my head, do you think white people are supreme? Like, deeply in your heart is you because you keep thinking about, you need to battle them instead of just being, right?
Right.
Instead of embracing who you are, you're always comparing yourself to them, the us versus them. Them over there, they did this, they did that. When do you stop and look inside and say, I'm worthy, I'm great, apart from, right? I don't need to think about your existence to know that I have a valued existence, right? And so this wording, only Black people don't, everybody else does. That hearing that slogan, that language over and over again perpetuates this idea of less than,
and it weakens you.
Yeah. Yeah. And unless once you've experienced other cultures, you're like, wait a minute, they're struggling with this too. And some of a lot of people struggle, and that's what I kind of tried to contextualize my video as. America has a value system that I think is the core problem of what we're dealing with, right? We have a value system whose foundation, since as a person of faith, right, we talk about what your foundation is. Americans' value system is based on individualism and capitalism. That's the foundation of everything that we built on. So what happens is, with any racial group, if a lot of Italians start to come over, if a lot of Russians start to come over, if a lot of Laotians start to come over, and they start to live in community somewhere in the United States of America, give them 1 generation, 2 generations, they stop working together. It starts becoming about me, what I could do, who I am, what I'm.
Isn't that how we were born into sin? That's our sin nature. That's how we are. Regardless of what race. Don't you say?
Exactly. Yeah, it's not a racial thing. And I think our culture has taught us that you're rewarded for that behavior, right? So think about I'll use law school, right? So
Mm-hmm.
most law schools, thank God opened doors for me to go to a law school that didn't really have this culture.
Mm-hmm.
Because I would have never survived law school if I was in the traditional law school
No,
culture,
you wouldn't have.
right? But the traditional law school culture is, hey, we've accepted you, all of you guys in here, you all taken the LSAT.
Mm-hmm.
And so you clearly are intelligent enough to get a
Mm-hmm.
particular score that we've let you in. So
Mm-hmm.
now the way that we're going to grade you is not on the quality of your work
Mm-hmm.
by itself, but how your work compares to everybody else's work, right? So it
Really?
breeds, yeah. So you're in competition with your classmates.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just did you
Carla,
make the
just
right.
because you're black?
No. This is law school culture.
Oh, okay,
Right.
culture period. Okay,
Yeah. It has nothing to
mm-hmm.
do with race, right?
Okay,
So
got it. Thank you.
the culture is compete with your classmates. Don't just get the right answer, but you got to get the right answer and say it better than the way your classmates say it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where your ranking is coming from, because you could do it better than them.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that do? People cheat, right? They steal people's notes because they want them to fail,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's be in a study group together. They get all the person to, and then they leave information out that they knew the person missed, so that
Mm-hmm.
they can tank that person's grade,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And people will say, well, they're just capitalizing on their resources. No, you're
It's
tanking a fellow
subconscious.
human, right? And so what I'm saying is, like, because this culture is, I think it's accepted in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we're okay with individualism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think in some other nations, part of the reason they don't have some of the problems that we have, they may be spiritual beings, they may have religion as a part of their culture, blah blah blah
Mm-hmm.
blah. But we love, we value in the United States the ability to consume as much as you can,
Mm-hmm.
to take it. It's sort of like this by any means necessary. Like, think
Mm-hmm.
about the types of movies that come out of the US versus some other country,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's always like the one guy who was the leader in the group, and he goes in and he changes everything, right? But as an individual, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even if he's in the group, he's the standout in his team, that they could have not done it without him.
Mm-hmm.
Think about our sports. It's a sports team,
Yeah.
but we focus on the individual
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in the team,
Mm-hmm.
right? We idolize that. Like the Chicago Bulls, right? Yes, Michael Jordan, amazing basketball player,
Mm-hmm.
but he couldn't get to a tournament without a team.
Yes.
He needed
Mm-hmm.
everybody. So you can put down Scottie Pippen, you can put down everybody else and say, no, it was Jordan. Jordan was nobody. If he was passing the ball just to him, so, right? He wouldn't have had a ring. But
Mm-hmm.
what we do is we've made people think that it's comfortable and it's good to do it on your own. So this gets back to our point.
Mm-hmm.
Black folks will say, wow, I see a problem, I want to fix it. They'll have a great idea. And you're like, did you research and see if anybody else is doing something similar? Nah, I'm gonna do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. This is one of the things that we're struggling with, right?
Right.
Other cultures have trouble with this as well. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that.
Mm-hmm.
But what Black people, when Black people are saying this, and they're saying it from a negative perspective, they're saying, why can't we come together? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying we can, but we do also have to address the fears that is causing us not to work together.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about it, but let's not stop at this generalization that only Black people. That statement, only Black people, is absolutely false.
Right.
We are not the only ones that do this,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And the other example I gave was like in Philadelphia, there's a high percentage of Puerto Ricans in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
All Puerto Ricans aren't looking out for each other. Right? We call Black on Black crime,
Mm-hmm.
right? But when a Hispanic kills another Hispanic,
You don't call Hispanic on Hispanic.
Right. Mm-hmm. We don't. When an Asian kills another Asian, we don't call it Asian on Asian. We don't say Korean on Korean. We don't say Vietnamese on Vietnamese.
Or white people on white people.
Correct. I was about to get that. That was we don't do that, but we'll do Black on Black because it perpetuates the idea of less, right? And so Yes, white supremacy was the catalyst that got us here. Colonialism is
Mm-hmm.
the premise that got us here. Capitalism, capitalizing without limitations,
Mm-hmm.
right? I understand using resources to your advantage, but
Right.
are you using resources to your advantage without considering the consequences or the to others?
Mm-hmm.
If you're not weighing all of those things, then you are harming somebody, because we're human beings. We're all interconnected. We're connected to nature. We're connected. We can't exist without these things. So if you're not weighing those costs as well, it's selfish and it's self-absorbed,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's very individualistic. So, but these are these things that we in our culture have been told are okay. We encourage, and that's why we get a lot of the negative things that are happening. So, but let's start a different narrative. Let's think about this, right? We're family, right?
Mm-hmm.
The thing, we start off with a family unit, right?
Right.
And now, generally, historically, Black folks, if as soon as you get close, what we do, pull them in. You family too,
Mm-hmm.
right? You the
Yes.
cousin, you the person down the block,
Mm-hmm.
but we grew up
Yes.
together, right?
We'll call you aunt in a minute. Aunt and uncle. We just,
You're gonna become an aunt, right?
yeah.
I'm in Hawaii, right?
Mm-hmm.
Polynesian culture, they call people auntie, uncle.
Mm-hmm. Right.
uh and many different, so Filipinos do it as well, many other cultures, right? We don't know you, but we're gonna call you aunt, we're gonna
Mm-hmm.
call you an uncle, we're gonna show
Mm-hmm.
you that sign of respect. And then when you start getting closer and closer, oh, that's my brother.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's
Oh,
true.
oh, that's my
Mm-hmm.
sister.
Mm-hmm.
We as a culture, think about it, Black people, Black Americans in particular, we speak in the language of we,
Yeah.
but we've been convinced that we can't work together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When we talk
That
about,
makes no sense.
it
Absolutely.
makes no sense.
Mm-mm.
Exactly. We see a Black person on the news getting arrested. Oh, look at us.
Yeah.
Look
Mm-hmm.
at look at my brother. You
Mm-hmm.
know, when you're a teacher, I can say for me, when I used to be a school teacher,
Mm-hmm.
those kids to me were my kids. I
Right.
didn't have any children, but they belonged to me,
Mm-hmm.
right? I looked after them, I cared for them, I parented them when
Mm-hmm.
their parents weren't there, because I loved them, because they were a part. That's our culture.
Mm-hmm.
But we're convinced to work against our culture, that we are the only people that can't do us stuff. But we do us stuff.
Right. Yes.
Right?
Absolutely. 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 And you know what? I want to add to this is something you reminded me of. But I remember when we had the store in upstate Pennsylvania. Before we had the store, let me back up a little bit. When Herbie and I were getting married, and we went to I would talk to people on the phone, calling to try to get an apartment. With They didn't know I was Black on the phone, and then when I would go, they would say it's taken. Suddenly, that happened
Right, right,
five
right,
times in
right,
a
right,
row. It was
right,
like, oh, it's taken. It was just taken. It was like I just talked to you on the phone. Oh, well, it's taken. And so I can remember going in our pastor's office at the time, and I was so frustrated. It was like, we're getting married in a couple months, and we have no place. The whole thing. And he said, please stop, Sharon, stop. He said, you're fighting. And I'm bringing this in here because I hear believers saying what you just said. Because my community is mainly, I deal with unsaved people. Don't say I'm just around Christian people, but mainly I am. That's who I fellowship with a lot. And I hear them saying what you're saying. So that's why I want to address that. And I
sure.
remember Stanley said to us, he said, Sharon, please stop. He said, because your fight is not against flesh and blood. He said, whatever you want. He said, you go into the presence of God. He said, and you receive it because the enemy cannot stop what God has for you.
Mhm,
He can't
mhm.
stop it. Then I'm not saying we don't vote, we don't do natural stuff, we don't do stuff, but we have to go with the mindset of winning, not with this defeated. I can't do it. Black people never win. Black people never stick together. But we can't go in with that defeated. And the other reason I did the children's book on diversity because I thought the younger kids are to recognize, what God ordained me to be like this for a reason, and I'm empowered. I'm not I'm not less because I'm lighter or because I'm darker or because I am. I want to fight knowing that I can win this because if we go into a battle, if our soldiers go into a battle and they're like, oh, we're not going to win this war, we're not going to win the war.
Mhm.
And we think Black people don't stick together. Guess what? And people aren't going to stick together. I mean, we have
Right.
to, the same way we will take the word of God, and I'm saying this to Christians out there, we will take the word of God and we will fight, for other things, but we won't fight for this and say, wait a minute, this is a lie, because this is not what God says. It's not, Black people aren't the only people who don't stick together, because then we're saying that the gospel is only for a certain group of people and the gospel is for everybody. I don't want to go off on that tangent, but that's the point.
No, no, no.
Mhm.
I agree. So this is the another way of thinking about it, and this is how I tend to think about it. So from a much more positive lens.
Yeah, yeah.
Let me use myself, and I'm going to sit up. So I never think now. So it's 2022.
I just want y'all to know out there. Let me pause for a little bit. This used to be my baby, and now she's grown, telling me what to do. But go ahead, Carla. It's good.
So if I'm a Black woman, right? And I am proud, like, if I died now and God said, I'm gonna send you back, which race you want to choose, I still would probably choose Black American.
Mm-hmm.
I might not live in America, but I would still choose
Black.
I like my history and the story that brought me to where I am today. Even the struggles, all the sum total of all of those things together has created something beautiful. Okay. So I say that as, sort of a foundational point. I rarely think about white supremacy. I know that this is a big topic, and I do believe that white people should have those conversations amongst white people because it's new to them, right? For some people they've known, for others they blah, blah, blah. But if I was to give a message specifically to people of color, Black people, Native Americans, if you're on the West side, probably West South, Hispanics, especially Mexicans, are not being treated in the most loveliest of ways, right? So if I was to send a message to them, I would say, stop thinking about white people. Stop thinking about them as a majority. Stop saying, well, they have, I don't have, so I want that thing, right? Because here's the thing. Just like most paintings, if a painting was all painted with just the paint color of white, you wouldn't see the painting on a white canvas, right? You need the diversity of those colors to create something beautiful.
You must have read our children's book.
I did.
Carla, go ahead.
And there's a beautiful song that makes me think of it every time. It's called by Gregory Porter, Painted on Canvases as well. So, but think of it from this perspective. Think about jazz, right? Jazz, blues, these things came out of Black people's struggle. Right. But jazz is a beautiful thing that like hits you in your person. Something really gorgeous came out of all of this history. And it's a combination of all of these different music styles, right? Especially when you get someone who was classically trained, right? Your European music, and they become a jazz artist. And when they start riffing, it's something so special with that.
It's not one-dimensional.
It's not. So what I often say is to people of color, stop trying to get what white people have and just embrace who you are. Embrace your culture, embrace your people, embrace your experiences, even if your experiences don't fit the stereotype of your people, because all together, if we actually started to work together, if we truly work together and we stop seeing people as us versus them, but Ubuntu, I am because you are and you are because I am, that we are one. What would happen is when we walk into rooms together, the diversity of thought, we would say, is an opportunity for greater creativity. We're going to come up with better solutions. Like, you don't want a Black person in a boardroom so that you can just say that you're an equitable company, right? That we care about other races. No, you want the Black person into the boardroom who's had life experiences different from your life experiences to be in the boardroom with you, because they're going to come up with greater solutions to give you the whatever your outcome, whatever your mission, whatever your goal is, you're going to get there better from the diversity in the room. When everyone thinks alike, you don't have as many creative solutions. So I don't want you to token me, bring me in just because my skin color is Black. I want you to recognize that when you see my skin color, it's telling you that I have a story to tell that's different from you. And it's gonna and I can bring something to the table that is different from what you already have, and the difference together turns into something beautiful, right? Meat and potatoes, it's probably fine to feed you, but you add a little spice to it.
Yes.
give you a little bit more flavor.
Yes.
Why do we like hot wings? You could just put salt and pepper on your wings, but you got salt and vinegar wings.
Yeah, yeah.
It's funny to me that American supermarkets,
Mm-hmm.
we'll have 10 different brands of
Mm-hmm.
paper towels,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's all gonna do the same thing. Oh, we're more absorbent, we're less absorbent, blah 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 blah. You know, this is a little bit harsher. That gives you,
Mm-hmm.
but you got 10 different versions of that. But then we want to be mad about people's different skin colors.
Mm-hmm. Right,
The-
right.
you obviously recognize that there is value in diversity.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
America has the opportunity to be the greatest nation on
Mm-hmm.
earth, but
Mm-hmm.
it is not, because you're maintaining an oligarchical political and economic system that
Yeah.
maintains the wealth of the rich, the haves. I
Yeah,
shouldn't
yeah.
just say the wealth of the haves, the influential, the powerful,
Mm-hmm.
who may happen to have money,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
But they have, some people are rich in power and influence. They might not have anything in their bank account,
Mm-hmm.
but they can open doors like nobody else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's influence, that's
Yeah,
power,
yeah, yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
We think that everybody needs to be the same there,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm saying I don't think that.
No.
I'm a Black person who really is like, yes, I want to work with Black people. I want us as a community to be in a better position than we've ever been before,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But I do not want to do that in a way that we ignore the fact that other people are struggling too,
Yes, 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 yes.
right?
You know what? I did this. I'm not messing you up. Finish your sentence. I don't want to
No,
mess.
no, no. I was
But
finished.
you
I
know,
was finished.
I thought of two things when you were talking. We were up when I was in upstate Pennsylvania, and I know the church that we went to at the time. And I keep saying the church because I'm bringing that in there. But I know the church we went to at the time, and they would say God doesn't see color. He doesn't see color, and I knew really. I mean, they sort of maybe meant well. God doesn't see color, but that started bothering me after a while, Carla. It bothered
Yeah,
the
well,
heck
it
out of
should.
me because it was like. And I had said to one of them, and I put it in the children's book too. I said, God who made a yellow sun and a blue sky and green grass and a black and white cow to eat that green grass, I think he knows color. I
Yeah.
think he understands color. It would be better to say why, if you want to say why did God do it, that would be smarter than saying he doesn't, he's stupid and he didn't know he made color. He made color for a reason. And then the other part I wanted to say was when I was in Philadelphia, when I was living in Philadelphia, we used to hold these connect groups from the church. We went to Freedom Church, and it was downtown
Mhm.
Philadelphia. So you had a whole group of a plethora of different races and
Right,
different people.
right.
And so we would hold those groups in our house, and it was a whole bunch of different, and they were all women. It was a whole bunch of different races. I'm looking at this, a whole bunch of different races in our connect group. And so I can remember one class, Carla. I sat back in the chair and I said, I am so glad that I am black. I said, not just that I'm black, but I'm dark black skin. And I opened my
Yeah.
eyes, and it was like everybody was almost plastered up against the chair or the wall, wherever they were. And I said that for a reason. I said, I mean what I said exactly. I said, I enjoy being the shade that I am, and I enjoy being black. I said, if you sat back in your chair and you just said, and this was a whole different array of different nationalities. I said, if you said exactly what I said and I got offended, I said, that's my problem. I said, because
Mhm.
God specifically made you the way you are for a reason. I said, and
Yeah.
we're all collectively in this room for a reason. We have something that we can glean from one another. We can learn from one another that I can't learn from my black sister that I love. I can't learn about the Asian community from my black sister.
And just like I
White
just
people
went
can't
through,
learn. White people can't learn about us from another white person. You can.
you can't. That's exactly
Right.
right. And listen, there are, I just bought some fruit.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I was talking about how, growing up in Philadelphia,
Mm-hmm.
I know watermelon, I know, strawberries, apples, honeydew,
Right. Mm-hmm.
the ones that you see in the supermarket, and that's normal, right?
Right.
So I was frustrated because when, moving to Hawaii, I went to the supermarket. I was like, why? They had sort of boring fruits, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe, and sometimes a pineapple, right?
Right.
But they had apples and bananas, and I'm like, I'm on an island,
Right. And you
right?
said sometimes a pineapple.
Right. Where are these? And then I started going to the farmers markets, and
Mhm.
I was introduced to fruits that I had never seen in my entire life. Like
Mhm.
I,
Mhm.
I've heard of a lychee drink, but I
Mhm.
had never seen lychee the
Yeah.
fruit.
Mhm.
Right. I just bought some lilikoi, which
Mhm.
grows here. It's
Yeah.
not going to grow in Philadelphia on the East Coast. And the point to me was, when I was talking to my nephew, I said, it's funny. The beauty of traveling is that you get exposed to things that you could have never even experienced just
Yes.
because of the
Yes.
location,
Yes.
right? And so people's cultures, a lot of them are developed because of their location and the things that they do there, but it adds something, right?
Yes.
It adds something to other people's experiences. Me
Mhm.
living, when I lived in Japan,
Mhm.
before moving to Japan, I talked too much, right?
Mhm.
My voice was often loud, right?
Mhm.
We in
Yeah.
Philly are loud.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
never realized how loud
Mhm.
we are, but we're quite loud,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And I learned to appreciate silence
Mhm.
because it's a very quiet culture, right?
Mhm.
And you have quiet train cars. And it was strange to me that it would be in the middle of rush hour, early in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, you're on the train and no one's talking, right? And you walk down the street, and I learned to appreciate silence. And then I started thinking, it's interesting to me that Buddhism, which talks a lot about silent meditation,
Yeah.
quietness, is China, Japan, Korea, in these
Mhm.
Mongolia. So you're in these cultures, and all of those cultures are quieter cultures,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
But Black folk, right? We in the
Yeah.
United States of America, somebody praying, yeah, yes, yes, yeah. It's rarely quiet
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
Black church,
Right. Right.
right?
Right.
We don't do silence so well,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? But I've learned the beauty of both. I
Mhm.
didn't experience silence until I went and I was deeply immersed into another
Mhm.
culture. I
Mhm.
didn't learn how to truly experience it. And it's funny because I watched different people worship. Growing up in church, especially when I was in college, I tried to do a racial reconciliation worship.
Mhm.
So, you know, college
Yeah.
campuses, they have all of those Christian groups, right?
Mhm.
And I noticed that you could call it different Christian groups, but I said that's the white one, that's the Black one, that's the Asian one. Campus Crusade for Christ,
Yeah. Yeah.
Disciples Indeed,
Mhm.
and InterVarsity,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And so I went to all the leaders of the group and I said, why don't we do a worship service together?
Mhm.
We may have cultural differences, but if we all serve the same Lord, why can't
Mhm.
we come together and worship together? And I couldn't pull it off. I got such pushback. People don't like that type of worship. Like, some people want to be quiet, oh, we come to you, Heavenly Father. And then right, so that's one culture. And then you have the other one is like, yes, Lord, yes, Lord, Jesus. And they're like, and other people are like, oh, I'm so offended by that.
Mhm.
But why can't we look for what we can learn about God from the diversity?
Yeah.
What is he telling us about his person
Mhm.
that he created? You say that, how can you be a Christian and say that you believe that God is the creator of all things,
Mhm.
right? Everything originated from him.
Mhm.
If everything originated from him, and I understand you're like, oh, but sin came in and blah, 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 blah. But you're telling me that all of these diversity of culture, all this diversity of color,
Mhm.
God doesn't have a piece of himself in all of that? And and by you deciding not to connect, maybe you're missing out on a
Mhm.
part of God's personality that you
Mhm.
can't touch until
Yes.
you take that other culture,
Mhm. That's right.
right?
We covered a lot in our
Okay,
conversation, but
good.
here's with this question I want to ask Carla. What are some practical solutions to help the advancement of Black people? What are some solutions? Some practical solutions.
I think simple, like, so let's say we just started small.
Okay.
You did you ever see the movie Pay It Forward?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And you remember the concept of pay it forward. I
Yes.
think I think we need to heal as a people. We've been taught, we've been culturalized, taught, indoctrinated with this idea to fear one another, to distrust one another,
Mhm.
and that good cannot come out of the Blackness,
Mhm.
right? right? And some people try to overdo it on the other side, but I think it's flip sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
I believe that one of the simple solutions is that we should start to look for opportunities to support other Black people and not just buy Black. I don't mean just because the way the dollars circulate, they'll talk about, oh, it needs to stay in our community, but there's so much that we don't own. But what is, if you see a younger Black person who's starting a business, right? And you see where they're struggling in particular places, instead of talking about them or saying, oh, they're not going to make it, use whatever resources you have to try to help them, right? And don't ask for anything in return. I think if we as a people have to reject capitalistic mindset, that value system, because it does us a disservice, because it was built on the backs of us being the lesser. You see what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
right? So our economy was built, and developed off of slave labor, right?
Right.
And other things, not just slave labor, but majority slave labor, right? And with that, what comes with also that is this idea of like, use whatever resources you have to get what you need. But if we started saying, you know what, we as a people need to be in a better position. So I'm going to look for opportunities to take what I have and give it to my brother and sister without looking for anything in return. I think that will start the process. That's one thing. Why am I saying do this, right? Is because there are a lot of
So Carla, before you go on to the next thing, like for an example, like if I want to do something once I get off this podcast, I want to say, what can I do? What can I implement now? What would you suggest?
Right. So a simple example would be it just how often do people come to you for advice?
A lot.
All the time, right? Okay. So let's say someone has advice, someone is asking you for something, and you realize this is something I normally do, but I charge people for. Actually, let me use myself. I'm a lawyer, right? Okay. So I'm a lawyer. People call me for legal advice all the time, right? And they try to sneak and get it for free. And I hate being manipulated, right? I really do hate being manipulated. Because but the funny thing is, what they don't know is that I would give it to them for free.
Right.
But they assume that I wouldn't. So they try to manipulate me to give it to them, right? So one of the things I try to do, like if particularly, there's a young man I'm thinking about in my head. He has no idea what he's doing, but he's trying to start a business, right? He called me for a 30-minute consultation. I said, you know what? I'm going to tell you everything you need to do. Sit down, listen. I'm going to tell you where to go, how to write it down, blah, blah, blah. He's like, oh, but your consultation is only 30 minutes for free. I said, did I ask you for money? I didn't. I offered to give this to you because I see what your heart is. I have something that I normally charge people for, but I see the work that you're trying to do in the community. And I see the impact that you can have on the community. So I'm not going to try to charge you. And people are like, oh, just do pro bono. That's not what I mean. What I mean is when you actively look for opportunities to pour into another person. Right? Something that you have to give and you trust that it's going to do good things, right? I am the sum total of many people loving and pouring into me and not expecting anything in return. And what they've now gotten is a person who runs around and gives away all the time because people poured into me. Imagine if Black parents stop saying to their kids, well, when you get to 18, you getting out or you start to pay rent, right? But imagine if they said, you know what, when you get 18, I'm going to begin to treat you like an adult because I want you to understand how to take care of yourself. Matter of fact, I'm going to start this when you're 14. So we're going to sit down and we're going to, I don't know how to do a budget. I'm going to find somebody who can teach you how to budget money better.
There you go.
Right? And then when that parent goes out to look and they meet that Black accountant who's trying to build his business and he sees this mother trying to do this for her young son, he says, you know what, I'm not going to charge you for that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to invest in your son
Yeah.
and teach him how to do it right.
Mhm.
If we particularly older people, I'm going to say like anybody who is a professional in any
Mhm.
capacity, we
Mhm.
have to start looking for opportunities to pour into young people what we
Mhm.
have for free, because we need to get them out of the capitalistic mentality of take, get,
Mhm.
mine, money,
Yes.
right? And the way that you do that is by you doing it differently. So that's one, that's just one. That's
Mhm.
one way, is that I
Okay.
think that we have to start pouring into other people.
Mhm.
The other thing is stop using negative language. As soon as someone says, why don't we try? Instead of saying you can't because, that
Mhm.
we want to start saying, let's come up, let's try to think of ways that it's possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? We need to switch our language
Mhm.
because we've been beat down with can't, ain't,
Yes.
not
Yes.
enough, cannot,
Yes.
we can't. We've been beat
Mhm.
down. We need to change our language. So
Mhm.
even if you don't change it for yourself personally,
Mhm.
I, that's something you can work on. When someone is speaking to you, if the first thing out your mind is out your mouth was going to be
Something
negative,
negative.
I want you to pause and
Mhm.
stop and say, even though this sound like, okay, I'll give you an example. I had a student who told me that he was going to be a professional wrestler.
Mhm.
I said to him, so do you know how to wrestle? He said, no. I
Mhm.
said, are you in a club? Mm-mm. I just watch wrestling on TV all the time. I said, do you play any sport whatsoever? No. I said, you ain't gonna be no wrestler. Come on now. Like,
Right. Mhm.
get yourself together. Now,
Mhm.
I could have done something totally different.
Yeah.
I asked him all of those questions, and I could have said to him, okay, so you have this end goal here. Let's come up with a plan for how to
Right.
make that.
Yeah.
What are things that you could start doing today, instead of saying you ain't done, you aren't this, but to
Mhm.
say, okay, maybe you haven't, but let me help, or let me make a few phone calls. Let me
Mhm.
see if I can find some people who may know how to teach you how to do this, if that's
Right.
what you want to do. Now,
Mhm.
maybe you don't become a wrestler, but whatever steps that you're taking, I have enough faith to know that God can use that for some other good.
Mhm. Mhm.
But
Right.
we got to stop putting each other down. That's my
Yeah.
number two.
Mhm.
Right.
Right.
My third thing, and this is a little bit bigger.
Mhm.
Um, I really would like to get Black folks to really understand their power. They don't understand how powerful they are, how much Black. So, and I'm not taking away from other cultures, but
Mhm.
Black Americans do not realize how much influence they
Yeah.
have. Right? We have, right? We
Mhm.
we don't understand the influence
Mhm.
through and people, they'll talk about music, but we have transformed the sounds
Yes.
of,
Yes.
right?
Preach to me, Carla.
You know, what, there are people who are millionaires
Mhm.
because they have capitalized on what
Yes.
Black people do so naturally,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So I really would like to get Black people to spend one day and not spend money so that they could see how powerful they are,
Yeah.
how much
Yeah.
influence they actually have,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
If on Juneteenth, and instead of everybody going out and partying and barbecuing,
Mhm.
I say, look, I don't want y'all to spend $1. So
Mhm.
if you want to barbecue together, then potluck.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Whatever's
Yeah.
already in your fridge, y'all
Mhm.
go together in a park. This is a great example. This is something that happened to me in Japan, and I would love to see more of this. And this
Mhm.
would be. I went to this beach in Japan. It's in Niigata, which is the northeast side of Japan. So
Mhm.
I went to Niigata with a Japanese friend,
Mhm.
and we're sitting on the beach, and behind us was a tent with a table, right? So
Mhm.
we're laying on the beach. The guy comes over and asks, "Did we want, a bottle of water or something like
Mhm.
that?" And we're, sure, if you're offering, okay, no, no
Mhm.
problem. So we wait a few minutes, and then they come back again and they say, "Hey, would you like to join us over at the table?" And we said, sure. Now we had brought
Mhm.
things to the beach to eat, but we walked over to the table and we're asking them, are you guys friends, family, et
Mm-hmm.
cetera, et cetera? And they were like, oh, no, we were all sitting on the beach and we thought, why don't we just enjoy the beach together? So since everybody had their individual food here, we decided to put it all on the table and we'll just share
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
enjoy the beach together. And a guy came down and he was like, hey, anybody want to ride on my jet ski? And I was like, I'd love to ride the jet ski. So I was like,
Mm-hmm.
how much for it? He's like, no, I just want you to enjoy the jet ski.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm done with it. And I like watching other people enjoy it. I
Mm-hmm.
take pleasure in
Right.
that. I would like to see Black
The
people really,
mindset.
this
Mm-hmm.
shift in the mindset. When
Mm-hmm.
you're at a park, instead of looking over, look at what she wearing, what she ain't got,
Mm-hmm. Right.
da, 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 da,
Mm-hmm.
but walk over and say, hey, sis, you want to join us?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that we can shift into the mindset that we don't need to be afraid of each other. We don't
Mm-hmm.
have to all be best friends. We don't all
Right.
have to live in a house together. Right.
Mm-hmm.
We don't
Right.
all have to, but let's deconstruct the hatred that we have
Mm-hmm.
amongst ourselves and this disbelief that we're not worthy.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That those are simple, easy things. They're big things. We can
Mm-hmm.
start do joint venture
Mm-hmm.
together. You have this business, I have this business working together.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, you could do that. We could start a campaign to try to rewrite the Constitution. Sure, you can do that.
Right.
You can lobby the politicians. Matter of fact, you could also say, you know what, we're going to stop voting for the same people over and over again, and we're going to start writing in quality people, right? You could do a campaign, but those are big. I'm saying start small with the change of mentality from I to we, and that we doesn't just mean your household. It doesn't mean just your blood, but the we is the community, right? We as Black people, and then we as Americans, right? Unfortunate when we leave America as American, then Black, but when you're in America, I think that we need to do some healing. So we do have to do the internal we first,
Right.
For conversation perspective. But I don't want us to get reparations until we heal.
You don't.
No, because
we're too selfish.
We are too individualistic for it to actually have the value that it could have. We've bought into greed as a people. So you can have a greedy individual, that's different. But when you start to teach people to be greedy, that's very different. That's like, we have a greedy culture.
So you think, Carla, our culture is more greedy than other cultures, though?
Than some, not all. But yes, I do think that we're more greedy than some other cultures.
I mean, I think as Americans, period, regardless of
that's what I meant. Sorry, I was talking about Americans then.
Okay.
Yeah. I do apologize. I did switch. I was saying as American, let me say it this way. I believe that Black people, because we are Americans and we contribute to the culture, we've embraced the culture of our oppressors. Okay. And so, actually, let me switch and say it this way. You know how people are like, we need more representation, right? Put more Black people in the White House and it'll be better, right? Put a woman as a CEO and it'll be better than a man, right? But if you've been, I'm glad you rolled your eyes, right? So here's the thing. If I have been schooled, if I went to elementary school, middle school, high school, college, many degrees, and I'm cultured in a particular value system, it doesn't matter my color of my skin. When I get into the position, I'm going to perpetuate the same thing because I needed to learn how to get inside of the system. Now I believe and I think that way, and I perpetuate that mentality. They didn't put people in the White House in these diversity positions. Not all of them had diverse experiences. They just had different color skin. Right?
What's the guy that was running for president? He was a perfect example of that. And I'll let you continue. The black guy.
Cory Booker?
No, not him. I like him. The one that was a surgeon. The black guy, Carl.
Yes. I know he's talking
perfect
about
example
the heart surgeon. Yes. Our Supreme Court Justice, Clarence Thomas. Right? Clarence Thomas doesn't. Here's the thing. He's probably had Black experiences, but in his mind, he pulled
He's in
himself
denial.
out of scripts, right? And he thinks of us as a lesser people.
Yeah.
So he wants to disassociate himself with us, right? And he makes decisions to prove his commitment to what it means to be a real American, ignoring all the factors that are contributing to why America looks the way that it does.
Right,
so so the thing is, as a whole, rich, poor, middle class, Americans as a whole, no matter what race, that while there are individuals who are different, we are culturally capitalistic and individualistic as a culture, right? Which is why you'll have somebody on welfare who's entitled, and you're like, wait a minute, how you got an entitled attitude when you asking me to do it for free? Yeah, like that. This makes sense, right? You'll have the exact same mindset in a poor person as you do in a billionaire. They'll have the same, because it's a cultural mindset. It doesn't have to do with the money that's in our pocket. They've embraced this thing. But I think that sometimes you get a little bit of difference when you have like that lower middle class people are in there, people who kind of struggle because they see the nuances, right? And they've experienced the nuances, so they're trying to navigate it in this world. I'm saying the United States as a whole, we need a cultural shift, a value system shift. And I think one of the ways that we get there is by embracing our racial cultural diversity. The Koreans who are Korean American, them bringing their cultural experiences into the conversation is going to help us change our value system. Black Americans being able to speak from their place and not always fighting for we need better, but saying, I'm going to tell you how my point of view is better than what we're doing right now. Right. Like what we can all agree, like let's take for it, I'm speaking in generalities, but let's say the COVID problem, right? So right now I just posted where the CDC is saying, hey, take the mask off, we don't care, you get COVID, pass it on, we don't care anymore, right? And then the WHO is saying, listen, people are still dying from COVID every week. So be careful. And it's like, wait, how are
mixed messages? Right.
These two things don't go together. And the problem is they're trying to balance economic stability, all of this inflation and money, right, with public health. And in the US generally, historically, making money has always been a greater priority than human health, right? We always put that first. What if, since think about what we used to do, like your mother used to give me castor oil all the time, and cod liver oil, right, to make sure that I was okay. Native Americans using herbs, right? A lot of us weren't as sick with all the diseases that we have now, but we run a prescription. What if we embrace the Native American, the Native indigenous people's love of the earth and stop and started to cultivate the earth differently and said, I wonder if we can attack the diseases like COVID and people's health issues by helping people to eat differently, right? So instead of saying, oh, forget about the masks, right? Say, you know what? We do need to balance economic stability. Can you, people from all these other cultures, can y'all come and tell us how you're dealing with stuff so that we can think through this differently, right? That's all I'm saying is the diversity of voices has value, and you come up with better solutions with it, and we're not doing that. And so we keep perpetuating rich get richer, poor get poorer, race, us versus them, Black people, we think everybody's our enemy, right? But that's because it's been perpetuated to us. Everybody is our enemy. when in fact that's not always true.
Mm-mm.
So
Mm-mm.
we need a new narrative. We need to change the culture, and we need to push it. And that means, for
Mm-hmm.
me, that means changing our conversation with one
Yes,
another.
yes, yes. I like something you said because it is the mindset that we have. But something you said earlier it made me think of something about. You said something about the Black culture being rich, and I think we are so rich that we don't know it in so many areas. I mean, I think when we if we change our mindsets, because once we get into an area, we sort of dominate it, whether it's in sports, whether it's in, I mean, I think of the food culture, and I'm not saying that Italian food is not good, Chinese food is not good, but when you take a Black person to make one of those foods, it goes to a different dimension. I mean, one of the workers I had my biggest contract in upstate Pennsylvania with the Rischini agency. I mean, I made a lot of money with him. And so and he said, Sharon, it's just something about a Black woman cooking this food. He said that nobody else in Indiana could do. And he gave me a stipend to work for him all the time. Whether I was working, I was getting paid. He said,
Not
and what it was, he was absolutely true. It was absolutely because the food that he thought was so exceptional, and his guest thought was so exceptional, you would say, Sharon, this is good, but it would be
yeah.
more normal to you.
Yes. 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 Yep.
But
I
because I
would.
live in an area that was all a one race primarily, I mean, when I came into that dynamics, I mean, it just shifted everything.
Yep.
And so I'm just saying, and so in that, we have to, I mean, we have to recognize how rich we are in so many areas. I mean, when I see people getting big butts now, they get butts. I mean, it looks so stupid to me. I mean, I think, but it was like, this is stuff that they tried to tell us something was wrong with us because we had it. Now people are paying for it. The lips, getting lip implants, the hair. Now,
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing, the thing we tried to stay away from it to make ourselves feel like another culture, or feel like we were white. I'm going to say that we would do those things, and you can see us slowly coming back into it a little bit. But I want to be a part of changing that dynamic, that paradigm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about the diversity that we do with our hair,
Yeah.
right? And we're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I can't take care of my hair. But think about all the different types of hairstyles
Yeah.
that a Black person can get when their
Mm-hmm.
hair, like when
Yes.
it's in its natural state, right?
Yeah.
But even then, okay, so I'm not a person, I don't do weaves, I don't do wigs,
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Right.
do any of those. I never did, right? That's not my
Mm-hmm.
thing. But when I
Mm-hmm.
think about the creativity that has gone into that work, I watched my sister in a hair salon. This woman was partially bald. I think she had
Mm-hmm.
alopecia, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so she had like little bits of hair in different parts of her head. And my sister did a weave wig type thing on her head.
Tawanda is
And
phenomenal.
she did so, but Tawanda kicked me out the hair salon because I need to show you my face. So I was sitting there looking, right? So, everyone's talking. I'm sitting there looking. And I go, what are you
We'll do here.
doing? Like, that
Mm-hmm.
is amazing. That is
Mm-hmm.
award winning. You just took a bald person and
Mm-hmm.
made them look like they had
Yes.
natural hair flowing down their back. I
Yes.
don't
Yes.
understand how this is possible. And
Yeah.
she's
Yeah.
like, Carla, don't do that. That's embarrassing. And I was like, no, it's beautiful, and people
Yes.
don't even value
Yes.
how amazing what
Mm-hmm.
you did was,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not saying that other cultures don't have, like in Japan, food was amazing for me.
Mm-hmm.
I love Japanese food, their natural food, but a lot of their foods are stolen from other cultures and they've added flavor to, right? Japanese people are known for tempura, but
Mm-hmm.
Japanese were like, oh yeah, we got that from Peru. We
Right.
just, yeah, like we didn't originate that, right?
Mm-hmm.
They make their gyoza. Gyoza's from China, but the
Mm-hmm.
way that the Japanese people make it, it's just, a little bit
Mm-hmm.
cooler, right?
Yeah.
There's Chinese ramen, but
Mm-hmm.
there's also Japanese ramen, right?
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, and this is what I love about Black people is that in our natural state, we got cool stuff just flowing out of us, right? But what makes me sad is that we don't recognize it. So we seek validation from
Yes.
our
Yes.
from white people, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Or from
Mm-hmm.
we particularly white people. We seek
Mm-hmm.
validation from them, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they don't let us in their golf club, so we go make a black golf club. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
well, why don't you just create a new sport and say,
Right.
well, y'all can play our sport? You know what I mean?
Hey,
Like,
yes.
why if they have it, we have to have it. Why don't
Mm-hmm.
you just create something new?
Mm-hmm.
You
Right.
can. You don't need to compare to them because
Mm-hmm.
you inherently have something beautiful. I went to a play from a South African choir.
Mm-hmm.
It was I was overseas and I'm watching this play, and this woman, she was singing, but she was making this deep guttural sound that it sounded like a tuba, like someone was playing a tuba.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, where are the instruments? And it was a line of women. I want to say it was about 10 women,
Mm-hmm.
this choir, and 3 of them were the instruments, but they were making deep bass instrumenty sound while other
Mm-hmm.
people were singing. And I said, my God, I understand why they hated on us so bad.
Yeah, right.
Because if I heard that, I would be like, God has come to earth. This
Right.
is this is
Mm-hmm.
amazing. I
Mm-hmm.
need to figure out because I'm scared. Because it
Right.
was so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can imagine if you're the minority, you're worried about being irrelevant. Black
Mm-hmm.
people are intimidated,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
But instead of I would like for us to realize how amazing we are,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
And not and that we don't need to seek the validation of others
Mm-hmm.
to
That's
know
right.
that we're amazing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think once we get there, we'll be able to work with white people easy. Like when I go on job interviews, I no longer this is what I mean. I know
Mm-hmm.
that let's say I'm looking for a job and I know I
Mm-hmm.
need a job. But when I
Mm-hmm.
go on the interview, I'm interviewing them to see if it's a good place for me to work as well. Will I feel
Yeah.
comfortable?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like, is this going to be a place that's going to pour into me as well? Like, I'm giving something out, but am I also going to be getting something in return besides just a little note on my resume that I can say I did this, right? Is it going to be an environment that is
Right.
going to
Right.
drain
Mm-hmm.
me or give me life? Because I know I'm inherently valuable. And so when I'm walking into that
Right.
place,
That's right. There you
I'm
go.
inherently valuable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
that's what I
Mm-hmm.
want for us as a people to
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
know that we're inherently valuable.
Yes.
So
Yes.
then when we're doing things, we're not seeking validation. I'm not
Yes.
be the first black person to do blah 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 blah. You can call me that, and that's it. Like
Mm-hmm.
Nichelle Nichols, for me, when I saw that she passed away, Lieutenant Aurora from Star Trek Next
Yeah.
Generation.
Yeah. Right.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Star Trek the original.
Mm-hmm.
She, for me, has like from a distance is someone that's inspirational to me because she just was who she was,
Yes.
and she was impacting places. She was
Mm-hmm.
going, but she wasn't like I'm the first black woman to
Yes.
do. She wasn't doing that. She was just, this is my
Being
gift. This is
her.
what I'm good at. I'm showing up, and if
Mm-hmm.
everyone else wants to recognize it as that, great. And then I'm going to capitalize on it,
Mm-hmm.
not for myself as an individual, but for my community.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
she capitalized on being Lieutenant Aurora to help create more diversity in
Mm-hmm.
that. She
Mm-hmm.
didn't do it for herself. She opened doors for other people.
Mm-hmm.
That's how that if I had last piece of message, if we're going to be capitalists, I want us to capitalize on a moment to benefit the community as a
Yes.
whole,
Yes.
not the person individually.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's what you can capitalize.
Mm-hmm. And that's important. I like what you're saying right there because I have another story with this, with what you're saying. People would say, I heard people say years ago about Oprah. Excuse me. Let me take this down. How Oprah wasn't for the black people.
Mhm.
And I knew somebody who was inside, who was one of her producers. Excuse me. I knew somebody who was one of Oprah's producers. So from the inside, I knew that that it wasn't the way that they saw it. And so when
Right.
people saw that Oprah was, most of her the people in her audience were white. When I went to the Oprah show, most of them, I mean, all the people behind the scenes that worked for Oprah were black, mainly, except the guy that I
Mhm.
knew, he was white. But I mean, most of them were black people. But this was the thing I'm getting to. And people would say those kind of statements, but Oprah utilized and capitalized on something because her money was coming from different ethnic groups. And so, I mean, her audience, I mean, that's where her money, the producers and the big people she knew primarily were white. And
Mhm.
so she fed them. She did what she had to do with them. But people didn't recognize that when the Oprah show was over and all of those black boys who walked down the aisle with candles from Morehouse, that their
Mhm.
education was paid for, and their education was paid for, but they had to pay it up. And
Right.
so
Right.
that money was going back into the community, educating these
Exactly.
black boys and girls. I mean, educating them. And so us being smart instead of saying, no, I'm just going to go with one. I mean, she utilized the whole thing. And that's how we have to think. We have to think smart. We have
Yeah.
to think smart and not just think one-sided, one dimension,
Right.
one dimension.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Having myopic. Yeah. I personally am, my belief system is, I'm not a capitalist, right? I know that I'm not, that's not my value system, but it is the culture of our society.
right.
And it took me a while to figure out that one of the things I kept running up against with people was that, because that's not my value system, I couldn't get people to go along with things that I wanted to do, because they were like, how we gonna make the maximum amount of money? Where I've evolved to is, okay, this is the culture. Got it. Capitalism is the culture. But can you capitalize in a way that benefits others instead of just yourself as an individual? If you're doing that, I'll step back and mind my business, right? And
Right.
maybe you build 6 mansions for yourself, but you've also created affordable housing for 200
Yes.
people. You know what, Carla, shut up, right?
Yes.
Because you made it more. It wasn't about making more resources for yourself, right, and taking
Right.
away, but you're creating. I want to see more people pay it forward in such a way that it creates I see it as like a boulder coming down a hill, right? That it just keeps getting, no, maybe a snowball that might start off like this, but as it rolls, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. That's what I want to see, people paying it forward to the point where I want to see, no, not necessarily see, it would be beautiful to hear generations from now that your grandchildren or great grandchildren are like, oh, remember when they kept talking about like racism in America? Isn't it so funny that that's going, like, I want to see a Star Trek world, right?
Right.
And I think that we get there by paying it forward.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Carla, I'm gonna tell you, this was an excellent broadcast for me. I am so glad you joined me. I mean, I really am. Are you gonna come back?
Sure, whenever
Yeah,
you
because
want.
I listened to your cruel, say, tell me what it is. I want to say, you
Cruel
don't have to
thought.
say cruelism.
Oh, it's just cruel
Cruel thoughts.
thoughts.
I listen to your cruel thoughts periodically, a lot more than periodically, and I love them. But this one really stood out to me, and it was like, I got to get you on here, and I'm so glad you accepted my offer and you came on right away. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much, little cuz.
All right. Thanks, Sharon.
I love you for coming in, and I'm going to call on you again, and
No
I'm
problem.
coming to Hawaii.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'm welcome.
It's a
So thank
beautiful
you for
place.
joining me. And there's so much information. I know people are going to send me questions, but I will forward those questions to you, or I'll bring you back on so you can answer them if they're the same questions. But I know this is going to spark a lot in people, because
Okay.
these are things we need to know. We need it to know.
Awesome. All right.
So I love
Take
you,
care.
Carla Cruel. Love
Love you
you.
too. Be
Okay.
well.
Bye bye.